All right, well, hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We are going to go ahead and get started because we have a wonderful program for you all today, and I want to make sure we have plenty of time. So welcome to our program, Creating for Comfort with Bianca Springer. And my name is Amanda Roper. I am the Senior Manager of Public Programs and Interpretation at Woodlawn and Pope-Leighey House. And this is a historic site of the National Trust for Historic Preservation located in Alexandria, Virginia. This program is being presented as part of the 60th annual Woodlawn Needlework Show, which runs throughout the month of March. And our theme for this year is Craft as Comfort, Joy, and Needlework. So perfectly fits with our program today. Now, before we begin, I would like to remind everyone, like I said a minute ago, that the program is being recorded. So during the presentation, please keep your microphones muted. And if you are welcome to either leave your cameras on or you can turn them off, whichever you're more comfortable with. For best viewing, we do suggest that you switch to speaker view. And you can do that by clicking on the view button in the upper right corner of your screen. And if you have any questions during the presentation today, go ahead and enter those questions in the chat, and we will have time at the end of the presentation to answer those questions. Now today I have the pleasure of introducing our presenter, Bianca Springer. Bianca is a garment sewist, pattern designer, sewing instructor, experimental quilter, and fiber artist. She is the creator of unique sewing pattern weights to improve sewing efficiency and speed. Bianca is a contributing writer for Sew News Magazine and Creative Machine Embroidery Magazine. And Bianca shares her talents as a brand ambassador for Shannon Fabrics, Baby Lock, Nature's Fabric, and is an arrow creator. Bianca identified a lack of diversity and inclusion in mainstream hand embroidery books. And so she is the author of the newly released book, Represent Embroidery, Stitch 10 colorful projects in 100 designs featuring a full range of shapes, skin tones, and hair textures. So we are very excited to have Bianca talking to us here today and sharing with us. And I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Bianca.
Thank you so much, Amanda. I am so glad to be here. Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'm really excited. So I'm going to start to share my screen so we can see my presentation. And I'm going to just walk you through, okay, from the beginning. There we go. So we're going to, okay. I'm good. So let me just walk you through our agenda today. I'm going to give you a little bit of information about who I am, my crafting journey. We'll talk a little bit about the benefits of creating, how I have navigated discomfort and used creating to provide comfort in difficult situations. I'm going to talk a little about how I got to the point of publishing Represent Embroidery, what motivated that decision and process. I will talk about some of the techniques that I developed to represent the hair skin of the characters and images in the book. Some of these are newer techniques, and I was told that it'd be really good for me to show you how we execute some of that. So we're going to show some video on how to do some of the hair how-tos. And then we'll have some time after for some question and answer. I'm here to shed some light on anything that might pique your interest, spark your curiosity, or anything you feel you want some more information on. I'll be more than open to answering those questions at the end. So a little about myself. I was born and raised in the Bahamas. I am the baby of the family of 5. We are a Black majority country, so I grew up seeing people achieve and excel in everyday life. I moved to the States to pursue my education. I got a bachelor's degree in psychology for undergrad, worked for a couple of years, and then went to graduate school where I got a master's degree in conflict analysis and resolution. My first job after grad school was in higher ed. I became a affirmative action EEO investigator. I'm sorry, I'm going to pause real quick because there's some noise here. I began investigating EEO, affirmative action, and sexual harassment complaints at the university level. In that position, I interacted with employees, law enforcement, and patrons of the university. From that position, I was promoted to the Dean of Discipline, where I adjudicated student disciplinary cases, again, liaising with law enforcement, FBI, and governing bodies that associated with the university. I did that for a few years. And then as a result of complications from my pregnancy and then the premature delivery of my daughter, I left higher ed to be a stay-at-home mom, take care of her and myself. And at this point, I hadn't been doing much making, much creating. Everything to that point was purchased, or I might have done a bit of mending here or there, but I didn't really embrace creating until I became a mom. I grew up in a family where my mother sewed, my relatives worked in alterations, and sewing and creating was always a part of my life, but it felt very utilitarian. It wasn't necessarily viewed by me as a creative outlet. So when I had my daughter, I started looking at adorable clothes and things that I wanted her to wear. And after seeing the prices of some things, I said, you know what, maybe I can make this myself. And so I pulled out my sewing machine and I started making outfits for my daughter. And because that type of mom, the idea of twinning with her really appealed to me. So I started coordinating outfits for us. And as I did this, my friend group got really excited about making and wanted to join in. So I began teaching my friends to sew. This teaching them to sew led to other people in the community seeking out my skills to teach them as well. And from that, I decided to establish my sewing business. And I named it Thanks I Made Them, So Can You, because every time I was out with my daughter, people would compliment us and I would refer to the fact that I made our outfits, and I encouraged them to do the same. And so from beginning my small business, I started to utilize social media. I'm an introvert, so the idea of putting my work and business publicly out there was a little intimidating to me, but it was really a big turning point for me because I began to build my sewing community. And so as I started a blog, I started sharing projects on Flickr and Facebook and began connecting with other people in the sewing community. That led to companies contacting me to participate in their blog promotions, brand ambassadorship opportunities. And early on, these opportunities were unpaid or I was paid in product. And I was happy to do that because I was new to the game. And so I was just getting more experience in the business. So as I did that, again, I was putting myself out there more, and I was contacted by a representative from Golden Peak Media who owns Sew News and Creative Machine Embroidery. And I was asked to create a project that was inspired by an entry I submitted for our contest. And that one project eventually turned into multiple years of writing for both magazines. While that was happening, I was approached by other brands for ambassadorship opportunities, for paid promotional opportunities with local and global brands. So my creative world was expanding. My place within the sewing sphere was becoming a little more solidified. As I was sewing, one of the things I did not enjoy was cutting out patterns. I find that part to be tedious. So I developed some sewing pattern weights. Actually, my daughter suggested I do so because I found a vintage set that was no longer available. And I was smiling when I was cutting. And she remarked that she hadn't seen me smile at the start of this phase of the project before. And I told her, it's because this is so easy. I'm having fun cutting. And she says, wouldn't it be nice if you can give that feeling to other makers? So I started to develop sewing pattern weights and selling them to the community. I customized them so people can share their brand. And it's been really good to, one, improve my process, but also do that for other makers. And so my journey continues, where I teach virtual and in-person lectures, workshops for quilt guilds, conventions, craft stores, and other interested parties who want to hear about my creative journey. And I will share how I came to the point where now I have written my first book. Throughout my creative journey, I have always encountered challenges of some sort, and I have used making as a way to help me through it. I love this quote by George E. Miller. He is a child art therapist, and he says, "Creating artwork allows your mind to be in a safe space while it contemplates the tougher issues you're dealing with. One can use the tools of brush, paint, pastels, crayons, etc., to expose and even for a short time, color those issues in a different light." And I just love that because it resonates with me, because there are sometimes I can't say what I need to say in a moment, but creating helps me do so better. So here are a few benefits of creating that I have tapped into, and I know others have as well. Creating helps you be present in the moment. We are currently in a fast-paced hustle and grind culture. We are constantly encouraged to produce. Even in the pursuit of our hobbies, we are encouraged to monetize our relaxation. Creating in the form of slow meditative stitching is a form of self-care. It allows us to slow down, to focus on the present, and appreciate the process of stitching. The tactile process of working with fibers and fabrics aids in relaxation and connects us with the moment. Creating can help us relinquish that sense and need for perfection. Creating specifically with a needle and thread is a way to step away from the drive for perfection and order. We create with the intention of doing good work and having a finished product that we're satisfied with. But that being said, seeing the hand of the maker in our work and can add value. There may be imperfections, but that's proof that you were there, that it was not a mechanized product that was created. Creating can help you increase your confidence in your abilities. It's very satisfying to get better at a task. Confidence and peace of mind can develop as your skills increase. Improving at a task is reinforcing to one's abilities. It's comforting to reflect on your competence and growth and improvement in one area, especially if you're struggling in some other aspect of your life. Slow stitching not only helps you develop this act of sewing, but it helps you create art. Creating helps you have control over the active work of your hands. Actively using your hands to create something from nothing contributes to a healthy mood. It is rewarding to transform materials from one thing to another. The lack of creative control and freedom to make may sometimes, contribute to feelings of irritability, apathy, and depression. Slow stitching is an ancient art form that allows you to work with your hands and gain the therapeutic benefits of mindfulness while you create something at the same time. The art of creating itself is therapeutic. Creating can help you relieve feelings of anxiety, grief, depression, and lack of control. The process of creating can help you articulate what may be difficult to express in words. It can be a tool to communicate a difficult message to a wider audience. It can be empowering to channel emotions into an expressive, creative project like a handcraft. Creating aids in improving your problem-solving abilities as it helps you expand the possibilities and find solutions where there may not have been before. In my creative life and journey, there have been many opportunities where I have been hurt and I've used creativity to heal that hurt. This is my beautiful daughter, and she was about 7 years old, and she was on the playground when she was teased about her natural hair being worn loose in an afro. She was very proud of her hairstyle that day. She thought it was wonderful, and she hadn't worn it like that in a long time. And she went out very happily, hoping her friends would love her hair and compliment her or say something favorable. Instead, they told her she looked weird. This really hurt her feelings, and she told me about it. And we spent some time discussing it. And we spent time talking about it. We talked about why her hair is beautiful, what she loved about it, what I loved about it. We read the book, Happy to be Nappy by Bell Hooks, which is a wonderful book that celebrates hair. And at the end of it, she felt better. She was able to move on. But for me, I wanted to do something tangible. I like to feel things. I like to see that process of making helps me heal. And so I went online to look for some fabric that had images that looked like her, that represented her hair. I couldn't find any. This was about 7 years ago. I couldn't find any, and I was disappointed and disheartened. So I decided to figure out ways to create a pattern that celebrated her. So I made her what we call the Afro Puff Diva, which is an image of a little girl with Afro puffs wearing sunglasses and a smile. And I created a block, and I printed this fabric for her and made her this dress. She loved it so much. She wore it to the park, wore it for school photos, just really embraced having fabric that looked like her. She loved it so much, I added it to another print that I used to combine with an image of me with an afro and sunglasses. And from that, I also hand printed some fabric for myself. And these bits of creating and using the designs and having the designs evolve and get better really helped solidify for her how important and beautiful I thought her hair was. I thought our hair was. It was a celebration and a reinforcement for her of her worth, but also by making things that we would wear and see and people would see in public, it communicated to others that we valued ourselves in this way, and that maybe if they don't see the beauty in it, maybe that would help spark that idea that maybe they should. And so this opportunity was very reaffirming, and the fabrics still hold a great place in my heart. We will, her school photos of her in that in that dress will probably be shown at her wedding. But this was such a great opportunity for us to take something painful and make something beautiful for her. I create to share my talents and show love. My day-to-day making is filled with work. I'm writing, working on projects for samples. I'm doing commissions for the magazines I write for. I'm writing patterns for myself and other work I'm going to do. And because I work from home, my family sees me working and they know what my time is worth. They also see these projects leave the house. I make them and they're gone to whoever has commissioned it. And they love and appreciate what I make. And so when I create for them, they feel loved. They feel included because they get to choose their fabrics, they get to choose their patterns, they get to have input on the designs. And so when I create for and with them, they feel loved and they feel cherished because they know that my making is important to me. And if I use my time to make for them, they then feel important. And also in that last slide, you see that I'm there with two of my friends. Making and sharing my time and talents with other creative people who are also sharing their time and talents with me comforts me. I try to make time every year to do a creative retreat with some of my creative friends, and we connect and we inspire each other. And so creating is just such a wonderful opportunity to share the work we do and be inspired by other people. I also create to use my voice in spaces of silence. the more my creative world started to expand as I was sewing and evolving in this creative journey, I saw that everyday representations of people of color in mainstream crafts was lacking. I am not an expert quilt designer by any means. This image is actually of the first quilt I ever designed and made. And I chose to do it because there was a contest on a site that I participated in, and it was a quilt contest. And the goal was to make a commercial quilt pattern and share it. And the site is generally for garment sewers. So the idea of working from a pattern was a challenge, or was part of the challenge. And I started looking through commercial patterns for something to enter. And the more I looked, the less I saw relevant designs. And I didn't need to enter this contest. I didn't need to design a quilt, but it was important for me to use my voice in this void. I did not like that 50 people were going to enter this contest and none of them were going to have a unique representation of a significant, something that represented me, us, or some diversity element. And so I thought it would be important to design something to just insert into this space, to be a little voice in this silence. And so following the theme of celebrating our hair, I designed this Big Hair, Big Dreams quilt for my daughter. And this project was also a test in innovation. The designs in this quilt are all done with a laser cutter. So I designed it on my computer and then cut the applique shapes out with a laser. And so when I entered into the contest, the idea of the design was novel, but also the execution was. And so I was able to present this quilt in a space that was open and willing to hear about the message, but also the technique. And it encouraged people to talk about their own hair stories, that encouraged them to question what quilt designs were being offered to little girls, what quilt designs were being offered to people of color. And so it was a wonderful opportunity to open that dialogue in that space. And this quilt ended up winning first prize in the contest. And she obviously is very proud of that. And I am proud of it as well. I create as a form of activism and community building. And it's not always intentional. Sometimes it's a matter of just navigating difficult situations. So many years ago, when I first started sewing and first started connecting with the sewing community, I became aware of a couture sewing brand that highlighted hand sewing as the method of construction, but also a way to add embellishments to the garments. I had never heard of this type of technique and was really intrigued by it. So excuse me, I jumped on board and started buying the patterns, creating the stencils, and stitching these images up, the designs up. And I started sharing them on my blog, and people who also like those techniques started following on my blog and following along on Flickr at the time. We had a Flickr account and a Flickr community. And so I was really excited about the new releases by this brand. And so one year they came out with this new collection and it was very expensive. It is a couture brand. So the idea that you will pay a little more for it was built into the concept. And as I was looking through their designs, they had this beige fabric and they referred to it as nude. And that, with the high price tag, didn't sit right with me. My nude is certainly not beige, and most people's nude are not that beige color. And so because I had supported this company and it felt like, hey, maybe you guys don't know this, I decided to reach out to the company. I sent them a message just to let them know that as a fan, I had a concern that referring to this fabric as nude marginalized people of color and prioritized white supremacy because it excluded everyone whose skin is not beige. And this was just a simple, in my mind, a simple, hey, do you know you have lipstick on your teeth type of message? Hey, maybe you don't know what you're communicating. So I am letting you know as a fan and a supporter of your brand. Maybe you should rethink this. There were several email exchanges with increasing levels of hostility, maybe, and entitlement and anger on the part of the brand. They did not think I had a valid point. They thought that the point I had was insignificant and basically told me my point was irrelevant. And this really, it devastated me. I had spent so much time investing in this brand and the work. And in one message, I felt invalidated and I felt hurt. And I felt like I was then having to grieve a creative outlet that had brought me so much joy and had brought me a wonderful community. Because I was so disappointed in that response, I decided I was no longer going to sew their products and no longer going to promote them on my social media. And so as a matter of responsibility and accountability to my audience, I simply shared a message. Hey, here's what's gone on. I did not like the way I was treated, so I won't be supporting this brand anymore. Do with that information what you will. And my community really stepped up. A friend of mine who I met through the brand and through this sewing community, you know, felt my discomfort in this moment. And she, as she was navigating this, the blogs and reading people's comments, and I was engaging with the audience, some people who agreed with me, some who didn't understand, some who didn't understand, but then saw there was a whole conversation going on, and she decided to jump in. And so what she did was she asked members of the sewing community to, and her quilting community specifically, to create quilt blocks with fabrics that represent their skin tones. And so in their families. So these are the blocks from my family. We are an interracially married couple. And so our fabric choices are a nice espresso brown for me, a neutral eggshell for my husband, and a cappuccino beige for our kids. And so she asked other members of the community to do the same thing. And she would then take those blocks and create a project based on it, a quilt. And so in this process was affirming for me because I didn't feel alone anymore. I felt like someone else was helping me navigate this grief. It felt like I had lost something because the creative process was so affirming for me. But she came alongside me and was supporting me with the community. So she ended up taking all of these blocks and designing what became the Nude is Not a Color quilt. And with this quilt, she used my image as the base, and she filled it with these quilt blocks from all around the world of people who contributed with their skin tone reflections. And then there's a whole story along with it. And over time, this quilt gained more exposure, and it was ultimately acquired and purchased by the Henry Ford Museum. And it is now a part of their permanent collection. And it was on display at the museum for a period of time. And so the creative process in the moment, at the start of it, was so painful to feel invalidated and discounted, but then to see it come to the point where it was a community effort, and ultimately now a museum piece, is really affirming to us. And the company, after much pressure, eventually did change the name of their fabric line. I don't know what has happened with them since then, because I stopped following along with it. But this was just a very wonderful process of going from discomfort to comfort. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about how Represent Embroidery came to be. In 2016, I had a catastrophic knee injury. I was working out aggressively, just filling my time, really getting my health together and having a good time with it. And one day my knee just gave out. I had a microfracture to my kneecap, and I needed surgery that required 8 weeks of recuperation and immobilization. The idea of being non-creative for 8 weeks was too much for me. So I decided to order a bunch of books online by the top selling, highly rated embroidery artists of the time. I ordered them sight unseen, and they came to my house. And as I was stuck in bed, I'm looking at these images, flipping through, and the stories and the images that were in these books just were white-centered. They focused on the stories and narratives of people who did not look like me. In that moment, I was not unused to this. I have been marginalized and excluded, and so I do what I always did. I made do. So I took those designs, I modified them the way I needed to be. I changed the nose shape. I found different hair fibers. I figured out ways to add color to the skin. And I just used my own creative energy to modify these designs. After my knee recovered, I didn't have a driving desire to stitch hand embroidery at that point. I was just so excited to get back to a sewing machine and continue my creative journey that way. So hand embroidery went to the back burner. In 2018, I had a second knee injury on the opposite knee, required that same level of recuperation. Again, I ordered mainstream embroidery books online. Some were the same authors. And this time I was frustrated that the content was the same. It's still centered whiteness and ignored people of color. This time I decided to send the books back. I was not going to modify them. I felt like I was tired of paying to be disrespected, tired of paying to be ignored. And so I chose at that time to figure out my own embroidery designs. And so I began just drafting designs that I wanted to stitch. And so those, the ideas that came to mind as I was trying to figure out how to make it look like me started to take root a little bit more. And so I was playing with these ideas and continuing to do other creative things after recovery and beyond. And at this time, I was becoming more engaged in the sewing community, virtually and in real life. I was making industry connections and attending trade shows and other creative events. And at one event, I was one of a handful of people of color in a room of thousands. And it was just very disheartening to see so little representation in this creative space, because with my social circle, what the people I saw online, how I was connecting with them, there was a large, diverse group of makers, but this room was not reflective of that. And it was disheartening to me. And I was struggling with how to make those changes, or who to talk to. How do we shift the energy in this room, in this space? And so that was weighing on my heart and mind. And as I was walking through the show floor, a representative from a publishing company stopped me to talk about my outfit. I was wearing something very fun and unique and carrying an interesting bag. And they were very excited about what I was wearing. And so as we were talking, she said, "Hey, we have an acquisitions editor here. I'd love for you to go and talk with them. I feel like you have a book in you." And in this moment, I'm like, what? I did not think I had a book in me. It was not something I was interested in at all. It felt like a daunting task, but I walked through open doors and I said, I will meet with them tomorrow and see what happens. And in that moment, more than anything, I wanted to take advantage of having someone listen to me. I was not interested at that point in pitching a book, but I did want to express to someone my frustrations about what was being offered. So I went to this meeting and basically, for lack of a better word, I basically unloaded. I explained, hey, here are the books you offer and here's why I won't be buying them. Here, my child does not look like this. This is not my story. I feel ignored. I flipped through the books and the hands in the book are all white hands. The models are all the same. There's no diversity here, and there are opportunities for diversity here. And I just expressed, I didn't see how I would fit with this company or with any book they would want to publish. I needed them to explain to me why they felt my story was relevant, because I thought it is relevant, but I don't see it in the room. And to their credit, they listened, they acknowledged my points, they acknowledged their shortcomings. And over the course of several months, I worked with them to establish a diversity and inclusion panel, which included other makers of color in the crafting community. And we had discussions about ways to improve the diversity within their industry and in their publishing and how they approach authors. And we worked really hard to create some more balance in this space. And through that work, eventually, I decided to publish Represent with them. So I made the decision to write the book, and I was still trying to figure out what that book would be. And 2020 began a radical shift in how the world started to see crafts again. The pandemic forced many people back to the sewing machine to find comfort and purpose in the form of mask making. People everywhere were re-engaging and creating to fill their days and find comfort in something they could control. 2020 also saw a radical rise and attention being brought to the brutal murders of Black people at the hands of police. Black people felt traumatized by the daily visuals of brutal murder and the perceived devaluation of our lives. Privileged and entitled white people who felt they weren't getting their way weaponized their skin to incite police violence against Black men, women, and children. We were under attack and we were going viral. Creative making seemed trivial compared to the daily struggle to simply survive and honor those that we lost. Represent Embroidery was born out of this tension, out of this sadness, and out of this trauma. When I conceived this book, the goal was to present uplifting, empowering, humorous, and relevant images and narratives in a time of overconsumption of visual trauma. I wanted to share the techniques I used to add depth and dimension to the designs that I had modified before. So in this quick flip through, you can see some of the images and projects I present in the book. And so when I was trying to figure out what my book should be about and what it should include, it was important for me to fill the space with things that were missing. There are 100 plus designs in this book, and still there are gaps. It is impossible for me to fill everyone and to acknowledge everything, but I definitely wanted to close that gap. And so I'll just show some of the images in the book and give you a little insight into what I was thinking when I included it. So this is a hair salon image. The beauty salon is such a part of Black culture. I thought it would be important to share this self-care, but also this little snippet into our Saturday afternoon, Saturday days of beautifying. Body positivity is so important. And I wanted to share this image of someone who is curvy and proud and happy about their body. All the traumatic images of Black men just broke my heart. Seeing them be hurt and dehumanized was just a lot. And I just wanted several simple images of Black men just existing and just being happy. And so that was part of why I chose that design. And the Karens were everywhere. And excuse me, I thought it was important for people to be reminded, you don't have to speak to everything. Mind your own business. Leave some things alone. Keep scrolling, keep moving, and just do you, just leave people alone. And so I like balancing some of the snarkiness with some of the fun. I see color. This one, it resonates with me. I have had so many people over the course of my life tell me they don't see color, and therefore racism is not an issue, and it should be eliminated. You know, the idea of talking about it is irrelevant. But I think it's important to remind people that if you don't see color, you don't see me. And if you don't see me and the struggles I experience just existing here and in this skin, I'm pretty certain you don't see your privilege and the benefits you get by existing in your skin. And if we begin to examine both sides of that, I think we're going to have better conversations and we're going to advance equality a lot further. And so this design was just very important to me. And this is just funny. Karens everywhere. I saw someone say this casually, and I just thought it was so cute. Stop caring about nonsense, because the issues that we saw the Karens bring up as they called the police on innocent people of color are insignificant, and they don't balance that insignificance to the potential risk to the life of the person they're calling the police on. So this is just a reminder, just stop with the nonsense. Gender neutrality, gender equality, gender identification is something that we are dealing with, facing with. And I just wanted to share some images that could go either way. As the person is stitching them out, you can make these people, some of them more neutral than others. And I wanted to show a little more, again, body positivity and a little cultural diversity in those designs. Allies, not accomplices, not allies. I think this one for me is, again, something that resonates with me. An ally is someone who will stand with you on a picket line. An accomplice is someone who will stand next to you at the prosecution table. A lot of allies will perform. They will be public. They will be there for the cameras, but a true accomplice, someone who is truly down for your cause, will be with you when things get really tough. And I think just having people understand the extent to which they are going to go to support a cause needs to be clearly defined for them, because a lot of it, we've seen some people stand on the lines only until it becomes really tough. And then the person of color who needs the support is left abandoned. I'm sorry. It's difficult to see because this is where you guys are. So this is one-on-one basketball. Again, just wanting to show positive Black community images. And then the woman in the bathtub is a reminder to take care of ourselves and to take a break, self-care. There is the whole boss babe and the hustle culture and the make and do all this work, but we need to remember to take breaks for ourselves and to find time for ourselves. So that's just a little snippet of what you can find in the book. Now I'm going to move into some of the techniques. So my main audience is made up of garment makers and quilters. And so hand embroidery is not necessarily top in their wheelhouse of crafts. And so a lot of the projects in this book are what I call more mixed media, where I combine fabric applique, embroidery, and crayon shading. And the crayon shading in particular serves a couple purposes. One, it allows us to get realistic skin tones in the embroidery piece, but also it covers the design area for those who feel intimidated by doing all of that stitching to fill in a particular design. And so this is a finished project, and I will walk you through the crayon shading and the fabric applique process. And with that fabric, you see I added some embroidered flowers from the fabric. Okay, and so to achieve the crayon shading, I like to use the Colors of the World crayons by Crayola. It has an assortment of colors that replicate skin tones, a full range. And I like to just take the crayon and color in like you would do a sheet of paper. And this is on room temperature fabric. And once you have colored in your area, you're going to lay a press cloth over the fabric. And with a cool iron, you're going to heat set it. And this allows the wax to melt into the design area. And after you've done that, you can go over it with more crayons to get a richer color if you'd like. Keep in mind, if you add the crayon on top of a freshly pressed design, it will melt a little. So you'll see the colors are blending a little bit better. So if you want to have a little more control over the shading, you may want to wait until it's completely cool and then add another layer. But I like the blending at the second layer with a warm fabric. Okay. And then you can heat set another time for every layer of color you add. Next, I like to use fabric applique. And my technique for adding fabric applique is to make a copy of the design. And is it playing? Yes. So I like to make a copy of the design and cut it out of the paper. And I know some people work applique in the reverse where they cut from the backside. I prefer it this way. If the other way works for you, you can do that. I take a scrap of fabric and fuse double-sided fusible web to the backside. There's a paper backing and a glue, and you use an iron to heat set it in place. And then once it's nicely fused, you're going to turn it right side up with the wrong side of your image to the right side of the fabric. You're going to then pin it in place. And after you pin it in place, you will cut it out. Okay. After it's cut out, you can then remove the paper backing from the fabric and position it in place on your image. Once it is secure, then you use your iron to fuse the fabric applique onto the design. If you choose, you can use a press cloth for this step, but because the fabric has been heat set from the crayon before, I chose not to do it. But if you feel you need for added security, you're certainly welcome to do that. And once the fabric is fused, you can then continue the stitching with the embroidery details as we saw in the previous slide. Hair. I had so much fun. Oh, come on, play. Ah, there we go. One of the most fun parts of this process for me was figuring out ways to replicate realistic hair techniques on some of these images. I used a range of fibers from embroidery floss, yarns, felted wools, crochet yarns, just anything that potentially had the look and feel of hair I considered using in these projects. And basically I simply traded a standard embroidery needle for a tapestry needle or a crewel needle, whichever needle size will accommodate the fiber. I switched that out and used it in the designs. So there are a few designs I was asked to demonstrate, and so I will show them here. The first is the looped, the looped hair texture. And I love a good afro, and to give a realistic afro as seen in this design, I do what's called a looped texture. And with this, I use a pencil or similar tool to create the hair. You lay your tool on your design area and go up and over the tool for several stitches. Once you have covered a small area, You're going to tie off on the back side of your hoop, remove the tool, and then reposition and continue stitching over the tool. You continue doing this, tie off again, and reposition the tool. By repositioning the tool, you get a more realistic appearance and varied texture with the design. Okay. Next is the Bantu knot hair texture. Oh, how do I go back? No, back. I'm sorry. Let me back. Bantu knot. Okay, sorry about that. So this texture is, oh, there we go. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know what's happening here. Pardon me. Okay. This texture is achieved by laying a foundation of single stitches and then adding a French knot and then wrapping the fibers. So I laid some single stitches and left an opening in the stitches so I can add my French knot. I wrap the fiber around the needle at least 4 times, pass it through the center of the shape to create the French knot. I then come up behind the knot, and then I'm going to loop the fiber around the knot that is there to add some fullness. And I'm going to do this, there we go, 1 time, and once you have it wrapped, you're going to tuck your needle under the knot and gently pull the fiber to tighten around the knot, but not too tight, just enough for it to be secure and add a little density. Excuse me. If I needed more density than that, I come up again, wrap again, and repeat the process. Once it's as full as I like, I tie off under the hoop and then reposition to continue the design. Okay, I think for this one I did a 3-strand French knot and then 2 loops under. Okay. Next, I'm sorry, went too fast. Next, I demonstrate the single braid texture. And this is achieved again by laying a foundation of single stitches and then passing several strands of the fiber through the hole in the middle and then braiding them as I normally would. Come on, there we go. And you braid them like you would regular hair. Once you get to the end of the braid, use all-purpose thread to pass through the base, create a knot, and tie it off so it does not unravel. Okay, and how are we on time? Okay, so that is me. If we have any questions, I can now open it up to anyone who has any questions they'd like to ask about anything I've shared.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions, please go ahead and enter them in the chat. And I just want to thank you, Bianca, for sharing such a powerful presentation with us and sharing your story and your talents. Really are so talented. People are just saying how much they love your designs.
Thank you. It looks like someone has a hand raised.
Please feel free to unmute if you would like to ask a question.
Yes, hi, this was amazing. Thank you so much. I was asking about the fabric you're embroidering on. I put it in the chat, but I think things are, popping in the chat. Like for the Bantu stitch and whatnot, it looks kind of like the fabric is, looks skin tony and also kind of suede-y. So where are you getting that from? Where did you make it?
Oh, I I did not make it, but you can if you, so that was a Kona, no, not a Kona, that was a Moda design. I think it's just a Moda basic that has a little texture. So it's quilting cotton.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. If you wanted to hand dye some fabrics, taking a little bit of fabric dye, diluting it, scrunching up your fabric and just lightly dipping it in the dye bath and taking it out, it'll give you a little bit of texture. Not texture, but color, differentiations in the color. Okay, anyone else?
Yeah, anyone else, if you have any questions, feel free to unmute. I'm not seeing anything else in the chat, just wonderful comments about how important this is, how wonderful your presentation was. And there's a question about whether the book is available in the shop at Woodlawn. And yes, you can pick up a copy of Bianca's book. If you stop by to check out the Needlework Show, yes, you can definitely do that. And I believe there are signed copies available on your website. So you can also go to the website on the screen and purchase a book through there. So.
And the copies that are at Woodlawn are signed as well.
Oh, they are. Good. Okay. I wasn't sure. Good to know.
Thank you.
And then someone asking for you to sort of type out the name of the fabric that you mentioned or spell it.
Oh, it's just Moda. It's quilting cotton. It's just regular fabric. It was just a it's just a basic. You can find, I don't know, maybe it's the image, but it's literally just basic quilting cotton in skin tone colors. I think Kona has a range of many that are a good gradient. So you can get a full range of skin tones with those.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, we are getting, unfortunately, close to the end of our time. I do want to thank you again, Bianca, for this presentation. And for those of you who enjoyed this program and would like to support this and future programs at Woodlawn and Pope-Leighey House, please feel free to make a small donation. We're going to drop that donation link in the chat, but we'll also include it in the email that we're going to send out. We are going to be, like I said, within the week, sending out a link to recording of this presentation, so you can go back and you can review all this wonderful information at your leisure. And it will be also shared on the Woodlawn and Pope-Leighey website. All right.
Thank you so much. I appreciate all the comments.
Yes, and thank you everyone for joining us today.
Thanks, Bianca. Love ya.
Love you, Laura. Hi.
Great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you so much again, Bianca. And for those of you, we're going to go ahead and close out our Zoom here, but thank you.
Thank you so much. Just right on time. So
yeah, perfect time. It was perfect timing. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Have a good day.